Good morning. I am Ron Bollinger, President of the Board of Directors for the Idaho State Civic Symphony, and I am honored to welcome our audience to our conversation with renowned composer Ellen Tafe Zwilich and the guest artist, renowned pianist Zwilich Biegel. The Idaho State Civic Symphony is honored to host the world premiere of Shadows for Piano and Seven Players by composer Ellen Tafe Zwilich, performed by Zwilich Biegel under the baton of guest conductor Connor Gray Covington at the opening concert of the season. This event was first arranged by our former conductor, Dr. Julie Sorensen, and we certainly express our thanks to her, and also to Catherine Thomason, our Director of Operations, for making the arrangements today. So my first question to both of you is to discuss the origins of Shadows and how it evolved into the new version that we will hear at our concert.
Jeffrey, you want to go first?
Well, maybe. We met in 2000. 2000.
Yeah.
And that followed a year and a half of just telephone calls and emails for a new project, which was the Millennium Fantasy, which was the largest group of orchestras commissioning a new piano concerto at the time. And after that, at least through the decade of the century, we've experienced so many shadows of things that had happened in the world and at home. Hurricane Katrina, we had a big recession. There was just and the wars. There's a lot that happened. So there were a lot of shadows lurking within people from all over. And when it came to the Louisiana Philharmonic being the orchestra to present the world premiere of Shadows as a piano concerto, many of the people there felt that the shadows reflected Hurricane Katrina for them, because the premiere was in 2011 in New Orleans, which is just a few years after the aftermath of this massive hurricane. So from there, I performed the piece in 3 movements with Louisiana Philharmonic and also the Niagara Symphony in Canada as a consortium member orchestra, and other orchestras in the country. And it came upon the year of COVID, and then why Shadows again? And before I ask Ellen to then take it from here, what's interesting to me, most important about this piece, and why I think it is going to be one of the most important pieces in the repertoire well beyond our lifetimes, is because not only the title of Shadows, but shadows reflect so many things. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a piece of music that just reflected a hurricane or a pandemic. It's a piece of music that will probably feel differently through the ages as it reflects shadows of what's happening at that time, that performer in that time is performing it, and which orchestra and what's gone on in the world. So it's kind of a piece that will continue to evolve for many, many years. Take it away, Ellen.
Okay. You're too kind, Jeffrey. The interesting thing to me about music is that some people think you can put it in a book or on a blackboard and, with numbers and lines and so on. There's so much below the surface that's so much more important than, let's say, this dominant chord or going to a do and do and do. And it's a very complicated thing that we experience, and particularly as a composer, I like to be, kind of wide open to what's going to come out. And the whole idea that you and I had talked about is that it's not just things that have happened that we cannot forget. It's also some of the underlying stuff, like the traditions that are underneath something, and without being terribly specific, the only thing that I could not resist doing, because the New Orleans Symphony was going to be the first performer, I always was in love with the sounds of the New Orleans jazz funeral. And that's probably why this has a big percussion part, because there are just so many parts of that are really significant to me. And I've used a couple of little things, like, for instance, in the performance in the jazz funerals, the percussionist uses something they call a press roll. It's not like a roll exactly on a drum, with people with both hands going like this. It's a thing with one hand, and it kind of goes. That's not a good imitation, but it's a kind of a thing that is only associated with, I think, that kind of the New Orleans jazz funeral. And of course that goes nicely with the pedal bass drum. I'm not going to do the imitation of the two. And yet there are many other things that kind of come to the surface that have to do not with just human experience with our world and all the things that can go wrong and right, but the things that people have brought to our country, other traditions, other elements of expression, and I found this really a very remarkable experience to go through writing this piece, and I have a saying now. I say I may be an old horse, but I still feel like I'm at the starting gate. And I don't feel like you can master composition and then you just keep doing it. I'm always at the starting gate. And this was a project one of the kinds of projects I really like is when I'm not sure what I'm going to do, because it takes a lot of preparation and thought and all of that, and then letting go. So this was a beautiful experience for me, I have to say, and I wish I could hear the performance of it. And you want me to talk about the fact that it's a reduced ensemble? This was something that I did during the pandemic, and I had said right at the outset of it, this is a time for reflection. What can we do with what we have, and what can we do different, and so on. And I had, as a composer, I had the experience of having a whole bunch of, live performances canceled in Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center and, Kennedy Center, canceled, boom, boom, boom. Still not back on, actually, most of them, maybe later this season. And meanwhile, some of the smaller orchestras, like Buffalo and Santa Rosa Symphony, and, stepped up to the plate and started figuring out how to do things during the pandemic. No audience, but a reduced ensemble. In most cases, it was like reducing the strings, cutting down the large string sections to a smaller number. And stages are usually large enough that you could fit, let's say, 32 people on the stage. So some of these wonderful, groups did all kinds of things during the pandemic, and they were able to do it because they were able to deal with it. And I started thinking about the solo performers, and I've written a lot of concertos, and I love instruments, and I love to write a concerto. But I've written things like I have a bassoon concerto, and it does get played. But when you think about a young player, how many times are they going to get to play a bassoon concerto with an orchestra, or a clarinet concerto, or even a piano concerto, or a cello concerto? So one of my projects during the pandemic was to create a series of 4 different concertos for a small ensemble, with the idea that if it's done during the kind of world we have in the pandemic, if you put 7 people or 8 people on the stage, you need a conductor. So it's like a substitute orchestra. And when you get to the days, hopefully, where we can play chamber music again, clearly, it can be done as a piece of chamber music. So this was my thought. It's not like it's exactly a gift to a performer, but it's a sense of making things more available to more people, because we got some fantastic performers out there, and so this was kind of a big deal for me at the time.
Right.
And what?
So,
Well, this was a big gift, Ellen, because it's basically like a new commissioned work. Even if you're rearranging something
Yeah,
from a large work to something else, you're still putting time into it. So this is really a tremendous gift to instrumentalists of all the four works that you've done. But the reason I remember you were telling me about this, and I thought, geez, I really don't know where this can happen. And who knows if anybody's going to even see a stage for another year and a half. And when I received the emails about the concert we were supposed to do this month with the Grieg Piano Concerto, which was supposed to be last year, moved to this year. And they said, well, we can't do it this year either. We'll have to wait another year. And then, the bells and whistles went off in my mind. Oh, wait a minute. You could still make music if they said, once I hear the words, we're reducing our forces, I'm like, well, here we
yeah,
are. And this piece then was the piece of the puzzle that fit the piece needed for a concert like this. So it kind of seemed logical and good timing for reflecting. When Shadows, I remember asking you about a piece that would reflect immigration for the most part.
yeah, yeah,
People leaving their homelands and going to new lands, but taking those traditions of those roots to new
yeah.
places. And New Orleans was one of those typical places. But the thing about the piece that's so great is that it could mean, as you've said, it can mean anything to anybody, and it could be totally different. I mean, I have my own feelings about what, like, the first movement is like the calm and the storm, and then the calm after the storm, and the second movement, of course, is very much of a New Orleans funeral, which is terrific. We never really hear that in
Yeah.
setting, but the third movement to me could be any number of things, because there's a lot of jazzy elements. I mean, for me, it's like a horror dance at some Jewish wedding or something. It's on and on and on and on, and it's great because you don't want it to end, and
Yeah.
it just takes you on this wonderful journey. But it can mean other things to other people, which is what makes it so great. So this
Well,
opportunity is great.
people sometimes say to me things like, "What should I listen for in your music?" I said, "Just open your ears and go with it," And it is interesting that people hear something and they have a different reaction, and I like that. That's wonderful. The other thing is that people think, I love the orchestra. I mean, I was a professional violinist. I mean, you really had to love it to do that, and I have written for orchestra, since high school, basically kind of thing. But people think, you put all these people on the stage, that it's powerful. But sometimes a small ensemble is as powerful. And I will be very curious I really wish I could be there. Oh, God.
You can hear it.
I'd be very curious to see if this doesn't appear possibly a little bit more powerful than the full orchestra. And for one reason, that you've got one player on a part. And there's that energy in chamber music that is so powerful. And the interactions and all of that going on. I'll just be very curious to hear it. And
It will be streamed, so we'll get the link
well,
to
yeah. I mean, I just wish
the
I could be there
concert.
with the air vibrating.
well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us before we let you go?
Well, for me, this is really celebrating Ellen Tafe Zwilich time, because not only is Shadows getting a premiere in its new creative arrangement in a new setting, but Ellen has also composed a work called Remembering Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And I asked her about that last October, and a year later, it's getting premiered with the Dallas Symphony and mezzo soprano Denise Graves and myself at piano, and set to a libretto by Lauren Martell. And it will be very interesting to give birth to yet another. It's every 10 years we're doing a new work.
We're making a big family. But there's something that I feel that I want to contradict something you said, Jeffrey. The only quote I ever do from Leopold Stokowski, whom I worked for 7 years in the American Symphony, is when he would hold up a score and he would say, "This is black marks on white paper, and we're the ones that bring it to life." I just got goosebumps thinking about that, because I feel what I've done my best. I've imagined the sound, all of this sort of thing, but it's yours now. And that's a wonderful, wonderful feeling for me. And it's not, you're doing the piece the way I want you to do it. You're doing it the way you believe the piece wants to be done. And in that mode, it would be a little different from time to time, and there's differences in tempo depending on the kind of space you're in, and I always think of tempo as like human pulse, and it has to have that quality to it. You get excited, it goes a little faster. You relax, it goes a little slower. I mean, it's a very, very human thing that goes on. And so I'm very happy to say, here's this paper with black marks on it, and you guys make it yours.
That's very generous of you. I don't know if Beethoven would have been that generous.
Oh, I think he would.
I think he would say, "Here's my
definitely.
Appassionata. Play it the way you want."
He's my buddy.
Okay.
I love Beethoven's music. In fact, when I first heard that he was dead, I was a kid, and I thought, he died. Oh, because the music seems so fresh and alive to me.
Always.
Yeah.
And we want to thank you so much this morning, both of you, for joining us and giving your time to us to give us your insights in this piece, and also just to visit with you. And we want to thank you very much. And we're looking forward to the 25th.
Me too.